The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Dawson saw him for the first time. A tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds, leading his horse toward the post office where her brother worked. She stood on the wooden porch of the building, sweeping away the endless Colorado dirt that accumulated each day in Montrose, and found herself frozen mid-motion as the stranger removed his hat and wiped his brow with a forearm that showed the kind of strength that came from years of hard living. It was June of 1883, and the summer heat had already begun to bake the streets of their small town into ribbons of hard, packed earth. Deanna had been living with her brother Thomas for 3 months now, ever since their parents had passed from influenza back in St. Louis. At 22 years old, she had expected her life to follow a different path, perhaps marriage to some merchant's son in the city, but fate had other plans. Thomas, 5 years her senior, had established himself as the postmaster of Montrose 2 years prior, and he had welcomed her with open arms when she had nowhere else to go. The cowboy tied his horse to the hitching post and gathered a leather satchel from his saddle, moving with the kind of easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. Deanna realized she was staring and quickly resumed her sweeping, though her eyes kept drifting back to him as he climbed the 3 steps to the porch. "Morning, madam," he said, his voice carrying a rough warmth like honey poured over gravel. "This the post office?" "It is," Deanna replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting against the sun, the shadow of stubble along his strong jaw, and a small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "My brother is the postmaster. He is inside." The cowboy nodded, and something in his expression softened. "I am Nathan Turner. I have been riding the mail route from Durango for the past week. Got a delivery from the Federal Postal Service." Before Deanna could respond, Thomas emerged from inside, his spectacles sliding down his nose as they always did when he was busy with paperwork. "Ah, you must be the courier they told me about. Come in, come in. Deanna, would you mind fetching some water for Mr. Turner? He must be parched from the ride." Deanna set the broom aside and hurried to the pump behind the building, grateful for a moment to collect herself. She could not understand why this stranger had such an effect on her. Perhaps it was simply that Montrose offered few opportunities to meet unmarried men her age. Most of the young men in town were already spoken for, or they were rough types who spent their earnings on whiskey and card games at the saloon. When she returned with a tin cup filled with cool water, Nathan was leaning against Thomas's desk, explaining something about the new route the Postal Service was establishing through the San Juan Mountains. His voice carried that distinctive accent of someone who had grown up in Texas, or perhaps Oklahoma, places Deanna had only read about in newspapers. "The government wants to expand mail service to the mining camps," Nathan was saying. "Figure if miners can get letters from home regular, they will stay working longer instead of getting lonely and drifting off." Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "That makes perfect sense, and you have been assigned to this route permanently." Nathan accepted the cup Deanna offered him with a quiet word of thanks, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her hand. "For now, yes, sir. I will be coming through Montrose every week, picking up outgoing mail and delivering what comes in from the southern routes." "Excellent, excellent," Thomas said, already shuffling through the stack of letters Nathan had delivered. "Deanna, Mr. Turner will be joining us for supper tonight." "I insist. It is the least we can do for someone who is braving those mountain passes to keep our mail service running." Deanna felt her heart skip, but she managed to nod calmly. "Of course, I will prepare something special. Nathan looked between the siblings, seeming uncertain. "I do not want to impose on your hospitality." "Nonsense," Thomas said firmly. "My sister is an excellent cook, and we rarely have interesting guests. You would be doing us a favor by accepting." The way Nathan's eyes met Deanna's then, searching for her confirmation, made her feel as though he could see straight through to her sudden nervousness. "I would be honored," he said quietly, and she noticed he was addressing her more than Thomas. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Deanna found herself taking extra care with supper preparations, making her mother's recipe for beef stew and biscuits, along with a dried apple pie she had been saving for a special occasion. She changed her dress twice, before settling on a simple blue calico that brought out the darker blue of her eyes, then felt foolish for primping like a schoolgirl. Nathan arrived precisely at 6, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt that was perhaps his only good one, judging by the careful mending on one sleeve. He brought a small bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked on his way from the boarding house where he was staying, and presented them to Diana with an almost bashful expression that contrasted sharply with his rugged appearance. "Saw these growing near the river," he said. "Thought they might brighten your table." Diana felt her cheeks warm as she accepted them. "They are beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Turner." "Nathan, please. Mr. Turner makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit and working in a bank." Over supper, Deanna learned that Nathan was 26 years old and had grown up on a small ranch in the Texas Panhandle. His father had died when Nathan was 16, gored by an ornery bull, and his mother had passed 2 years later from a grief that seemed to consume her from the inside out. He had 2 younger sisters who had gone to live with an aunt in San Antonio, and Nathan had spent the past several years working various jobs, cattle drives, ranch hand work, even a stint as a deputy in a small town near the Oklahoma border before finding employment with the Postal Service. "I like the riding," he explained, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "And I like feeling like I am doing something that matters. People depend on letters, you know. Sometimes a letter from home is the only thing keeping someone going." Thomas launched into a lengthy discussion about the importance of mail service in building civilization in the West. But Diana found herself less interested in her brother's philosophical musings, and more captivated by the way Nathan listened, giving Thomas his full attention even when the conversation veered into tedious territory. When Nathan turned his attention to Deanna, asking about her life in St. Louis and what had brought her to Colorado, she found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with strangers. Perhaps it was the genuine interest in his gray eyes, or the way he asked follow-up questions that showed he was truly listening. But she told him about her parents' death, about the strange grief of losing both anchors of her life at once, about the disorientation of leaving everything familiar behind to start fresh in a place so different from the city she had known. "I miss the trees most," she admitted. "St. Louis had such beautiful trees. Here everything is so open and dry, at least in town. The mountains are lovely, but they feel distant." Nathan nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling. When I first left Texas, I missed the particular smell of the prairie after rain. Took me years to stop looking for it." He paused, then added, "But I have found that missing something can mean you are ready to let new things in, if that makes sense." It did make sense, more than Deanna wanted to admit. She had spent the past 3 months feeling suspended between her old life and whatever came next, unable to fully commit to Montrose as home. But sitting across from Nathan, watching the lamplight play across his weathered features, she felt something shift inside her, a tiny opening of possibility. The evening ended too soon, with Nathan thanking them for their hospitality and promising to return the following week. After he left, Thomas immediately retreated to his small office to work on correspondence, leaving Diana to clean up. She found herself moving slowly, replaying moments from the evening, the way Nathan had laughed at one of her observations about the differences between city and rural life, the serious expression he had worn when talking about his mother, the careful way he had complimented her cooking without being excessive or false. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the small room off the kitchen, Diana stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was being foolish. She had known Nathan Turner for less than 12 hours. Whatever attraction she felt was surely based on nothing more substantial than a handsome face and a lonely heart. By morning, she told herself, this feeling would pass, but morning came and the feeling remained. The week that followed felt interminable. Diana went about her usual tasks, helping Thomas with the post office, maintaining their small household, attending Sunday services at the modest church on the edge of town. But her mind kept drifting to Nathan. She found herself wondering what he was doing, whether the mountain passes were dangerous, whether he thought about her at all, or if she was simply one of many forgettable faces he encountered on his route. Thomas, usually oblivious to matters of the heart, surprised her by commenting on her distraction. "You are thinking about our courier," he said one evening, not looking up from the letter he was writing. Diana felt her face flush. "I do not know what you mean." "Diana, I may be absorbed in my work, but I am not blind. You have been staring out the window toward the southern road for 3 days now." He set down his pen and regarded her with surprising gentleness. "Nathan Turner seems like a decent man. If he shows continued interest when he returns, I would have no objection to him calling on you properly." The fact that Thomas had noticed and approved somehow made her feelings seem more legitimate, less like foolish fantasy. "He may not be interested," Diana said quietly. "He brought you wildflowers on your first meeting," Thomas pointed out. "Men do not typically do that without interest." When the following Tuesday arrived, Diana rose early and took extra care with her appearance, then felt embarrassed by her obvious anticipation. She busied herself with tasks around the post office, organizing the small lending library Thomas maintained in one corner, sweeping the already clean floor, rearranging the wanted posters on the wall outside. Nathan arrived just before noon, and Diana's heart leaped when she saw his face break into a genuine smile as he spotted her on the porch. "Miss Dawson," he said, dismounting with fluid grace. "I was hoping I would see you." "The post office is my brother's building," Diana replied, trying for lightness. "I am usually here." "I was hoping for that too," Nathan said, and there was something in his tone that made her pulse quicken. Thomas emerged to collect the mail delivery, and the official business was quickly concluded. But Nathan did not immediately leave as Diana had feared he might. Instead, he lingered, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in a way that betrayed nervousness. "Miss Dawson, I was wondering if you might accompany me on a walk this afternoon, if your brother can spare you and if you are so inclined. I have a few hours before I need to start back, and I thought I might show you something I discovered last week." Diana glanced at Thomas, who waved his hand in a shooing motion. "Go, go. I can manage the afternoon post just fine." The something Nathan wanted to show her turned out to be a grove of cottonwood trees growing along a bend in the Uncompahgre River, about a 20-minute walk from town. It was a small oasis of green in the dry landscape, with dappled shade and the sound of water moving over stones. "I know you said you miss trees," Nathan explained as they stood at the edge of the grove. "This is not much compared to what you are used to, I imagine, but it is peaceful." Deanna felt something tighten in her chest, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It is perfect," she said honestly. "Thank you for sharing this with me." They walked slowly through the trees, talking easily about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about the various people he met on his route. The miners who were always eager for letters from families back east. The small trading post run by a Ute woman and her French-Canadian husband. The dangers of the mountain passes where one wrong step could send horse and rider tumbling down a steep ravine. Deanna found herself telling him things she had not shared with anyone in Montrose. Her fears about becoming a burden to Thomas, her uncertainty about what her future held, her growing appreciation for the stark beauty of Colorado, even as she sometimes felt overwhelmed by its vastness. "I feel like I am supposed to become someone new here," she confessed, trailing her fingers along the rough bark of a cottonwood. "But I do not yet know who that person is." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the river. "I think maybe we are always becoming new versions of ourselves. The trick is not fighting it too hard." They stood in companionable silence, and Deanna became acutely aware of how close Nathan was standing, close enough that she could see the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, close enough to catch the scent of leather and soap, and something essentially masculine. "Deanna," Nathan said, and the sound of her given name in his voice made her look up at him. "I have been thinking about you all week. I know we barely know each other, and I am just a postal courier without much to offer, but I would like permission to call on you when I come through town. Properly, I mean, if that is something you might want." Deanna felt as though all the air had left her lungs. She had hoped, but hope and reality were different things. "I would want that very much," she managed to say. The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like sunrise, and he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, and the simple contact felt momentous. "I will be back next Tuesday," he said. "And every Tuesday after that, for as long as you will have me." Over the following weeks, Nathan's weekly visits became the axis around which Diana's life revolved. Each Tuesday, he would arrive with mail delivery, conduct his business with Thomas, and then he and Deanna would spend a few precious hours together before he had to begin his return journey. Sometimes they walked by the river. Other times they sat on the porch of the post office, talking while Deanna mended clothes or shelled peas. Once, they attended a church social together, and Deanna took quiet pleasure in the envious looks other young women gave her when Nathan brought her lemonade and stayed by her side all evening. Thomas proved to be a surprisingly lenient chaperone, often finding reasons to be absorbed in work while Nathan and Deanna talked. "I trust you both to behave appropriately," he told Deanna after the third week. "And I trust Nathan is serious about his intentions." Nathan's intentions did indeed seem serious. He brought small gifts when he could, nothing expensive but always thoughtful. A book of poetry he had traded for at the trading post, knowing Deanna loved to read. A particularly beautiful river stone he had found, smooth and shot through with veins of white quartz. Once, a letter he had written during the week, full of observations about his journey and thoughts he wanted to share with her. Deanna found herself falling in love, truly and deeply, in a way she had never experienced before. It was not the girlish infatuation she had felt for boys in St. Louis, but something richer and more substantial. She loved Nathan's quiet strength, the way he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station, his dry sense of humor, the gentle way he handled his horse, the careful attention he gave to his responsibilities. She loved how he listened to her, really listened, as though her thoughts and opinions mattered. By August, They had fallen into such an easy intimacy that it felt as though they had known each other for years rather than months. Nathan had begun to talk about the future in concrete terms, about finding a way to be based in Montrose rather than Durango, about building a small house on some land he had his eye on near the river. It was on a particularly hot Tuesday in late August that everything changed. Nathan arrived looking tired and dusty, and there was a tension in his shoulders that immediately caught Diana's attention. He went through the mail exchange with Thomas mechanically, and when Diana suggested their usual walk, he agreed but seemed distracted. They had barely reached the cottonwood grove when Nathan stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Diana, I need to tell you something, and I am worried about how you will take it." Her heart clenched with sudden fear. "What is it?" "The Postal Service is reorganizing the routes. They want to extend the Southern line all the way to Santa Fe, and they have asked me to take it on." He squeezed her hands gently. "It would mean better pay, enough that I could start saving seriously for our future. But it would also mean I would only be coming through Montrose once a month instead of every week." Diana felt the news hit her like a physical blow. Once a month. 4 weeks between seeing him instead of one. It felt impossible, unbearable. But she could see the conflict in Nathan's eyes, the way he was watching her, and she understood that this was an important opportunity for him. "When would this start?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "In 2 weeks. Diana, I know this is not what we wanted, but the extra money would mean we could marry sooner. I could buy that land I have been looking at, start building us a house. It would only be for a year or so, just until I have enough saved that I could take a less demanding position. Marriage." He had said it so naturally, as though it was a given between them, and Diana realized with sudden clarity that it was. Whatever formal proposal might come, they had already chosen each other. "A year," she repeated, trying to wrap her mind around the timeline, "or less if possible. And I would write to you every week, I swear it, multiple times a week. You would be sick of my letters before long." Despite herself, Diana felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I could never be sick of your letters." Nathan pulled her closer, and for the first time, he wrapped his arms around her in a full embrace. Diana let herself lean into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. They had been careful until now, mindful of propriety, but this moment seemed to call for something more. "I love you," Nathan said quietly, his voice rumbling in his chest. "I should have said it before, but I love you, Diana. I have probably loved you since that first morning when you brought me water and looked at me like I was someone worth seeing." Diana tilted her head back to look at him and found his gray eyes intense and earnest. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have loved you since you brought me wildflowers." Nathan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Diana rose on her toes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but it quickly deepened into something that made Diana's knees weak and her heart race. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I will make this work," he promised. "Once a month will have to be enough until I can arrange something better. And Diana, I want to ask your brother officially, but I am asking you first. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Diana said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They walked back to town in a daze of happiness, their fingers intertwined. Thomas took one look at their faces and started laughing. "Finally," he said. "I was beginning to wonder if you two would ever get around to it." Nathan formally asked for Diana's hand, and Thomas gave his blessing with genuine warmth. "You are a good man, Nathan Turner. I cannot think of anyone I would rather trust with my sister's happiness. The next week passed in a flurry of planning and dreaming. Nathan would take the new route, saving as much money as possible. They would marry in the spring, giving Nathan time to build them a modest house and establish some financial security. Deanna would continue living with Thomas in the meantime, helping with the post office and preparing for her future as Nathan's wife. Nathan's last weekly visit came too quickly. The knowledge that they would not see each other for a full month hung over them, making every moment precious. They spent the afternoon by the river again, talking about their plans and simply being together. "I am going to miss you terribly," Deanna said, watching the water flow past. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," Nathan agreed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. "I want you to have this." Diana unwrapped it carefully, finding a delicate silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. It was simple but beautiful, exactly the kind of thing she would have chosen for herself. "It was my mother's," Nathan explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "She would have liked you very much. I want you to wear it as a promise. This spring I will replace it with a proper wedding band, but for now this is my pledge to you." Deanna looked at the ring on her finger, feeling the weight of the promise it represented. "I will treasure it," she said, "and I will count the days until I see you again." Their goodbye was bittersweet, full of kisses and whispered promises and the ache of impending separation. Deanna stood on the post office porch long after Nathan had ridden out of sight, her fingers touching the ring on her hand, already missing him. The first month apart was harder than Deanna had anticipated. She threw herself into helping Thomas, into maintaining the household, into preparing for the future. She wrote to Nathan almost daily, long letters full of the small details of her life and her hopes for their shared future. When his letters arrived, delivered by the new courier who had taken over the weekly Montrose route, Diana devoured them, reading and rereading until she had memorized every word. Nathan's letters were wonderful, full of descriptions of the landscape between Montrose and Santa Fe, stories about the people he met, and expressions of love that made Diana's heart ache with longing. He was making good progress on saving money, he reported, and had already put a deposit on the land he wanted. If all continued well, they might be able to marry even sooner than spring. When Nathan finally returned at the end of September, Deanna saw him riding into town and ran down the street in a most undignified manner, not caring who saw. Nathan dismounted while his horse was still moving and caught her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. "I missed you," she said against his neck. "I missed you so much." "Never again," Nathan promised. "I cannot bear it. I am going to talk to the postal supervisor about finding a way to route through Montrose more frequently, even if it means a longer overall journey." They spent every possible moment of his 3-day stay in Montrose together. Nathan showed Deanna the plot of land he had purchased, a beautiful spot near the cottonwood grove with a view of the mountains. He had already started clearing the area for building, working on it whenever he had a spare day. "I have been drawing up plans," he said, showing her a carefully sketched layout. "Nothing fancy but solid. 2 bedrooms to start, room to add more later if we are blessed with children. A good kitchen because I know you like to cook. A porch where we can sit in the evenings." Deanna studied the drawings, imagining their life in this house he was planning with such care. "It is perfect," she said. "When can we start building?" "I have hired a carpenter from Durango to help, and we will begin in November. If the weather holds, we could have the basic structure done by February, finished and livable by April." He looked at her with hope and uncertainty mixed in his expression. Would you marry me in April, Deanna? I know it is sooner than we discussed, but I cannot stand these long separations. I want you as my wife. April, Deanna agreed, her heart singing. I will marry you in April. The months that followed tested them both. Nathan managed to arrange his route to come through Montrose twice a month instead of once, but it still meant long stretches apart. Deanna focused on preparing for their marriage, sewing clothes and linens, learning from the other women in town about keeping a household in the harsh Colorado climate, helping Thomas train a new assistant so she could eventually leave the post office in good hands. The house slowly took shape on Nathan's land. Deanna visited it often, watching the walls go up, the roof take form, the windows being fitted. Each detail was exactly as Nathan had described in his letters, and seeing their future home become real filled her with joy and anticipation. Winter came hard that year, with heavy snows that sometimes delayed Nathan's trips. Deanna spent those weeks worried, knowing the mountain passes could be treacherous in bad weather. When Nathan would finally arrive, often half frozen and exhausted, she would thank God for his safety and hold him a little tighter. It was during one of these winter visits, in January of 1884, that Nathan arrived with troubling news. He looked worried as he sat in Thomas's kitchen, accepting the hot coffee Deanna pressed into his cold hands. There has been trouble on the route, he said. A gang has been robbing stages and couriers between Durango and Santa Fe. They hit 3 mail carriers in the past month. Thomas frowned. Have they caught any of the outlaws? Not yet. They are smart, hitting in different locations, never establishing a pattern. Nathan looked at Deanna, and she saw real fear in his eyes. The Postal Service is considering suspending the route until the gang is caught. But that would mean no income, Deanna said, her mind immediately going to practical concerns. How would we manage? I have enough saved that we would be all right for a few months, Nathan assured her, and I could find other work locally. But Deanna, there is something else. The route supervisor wants me to help set a trap for these outlaws. The room went silent. Thomas set down his cup carefully. That sounds dangerous. It would be, Nathan admitted, but they need someone who knows the route well and who the outlaws would not suspect. I would be carrying decoy mail with law enforcement hidden nearby to move in when the gang strikes. Deanna felt her blood run cold. No, she said firmly. Nathan, you cannot. What if something goes wrong? What if they shoot first and the law is too far away to help? Nathan reached for her hand. I know it is risky, but these men have already killed one courier down near Alamosa. If we can stop them, the route stays open and everyone who depends on it is safer, including me in the long run. Find someone else, Deanna said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. Let someone else take the risk. There is no one else who knows the route like I do, who would recognize if something was off. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. Deanna, I am not trying to be a hero, but I have a responsibility to my job and to the people who depend on that mail. I cannot ignore that. Thomas, who had been silent, spoke up. When would this happen? Next week, on my return journey south. There is a stretch about 20 miles south of here where they have hit twice before. The law thinks they will try again. Deanna wanted to forbid it, to beg Nathan to refuse, but she could see the resolve in his face. This was part of who he was, this sense of duty and responsibility. It was one of the things she loved about him. But love also meant fear, meant imagining all the ways this could go terribly wrong. Promise me you will be careful, she said, her voice breaking. Promise me you will come back to me. I promise, Nathan said, pulling her into his arms despite Thomas's presence. I will be careful and I will come back to you. We have a wedding in April, remember. I have no intention of missing that. The week before Nathan's return was the longest of Deanna's life. She barely slept, jumping at every sound, imagining all sorts of terrible scenarios. Thomas tried to distract her with extra work, but nothing could quite banish the knot of anxiety in her stomach. When the day came, Deanna stationed herself on the post office porch from dawn onward, watching the northern road. The plan was for Nathan to come through Montrose in the morning, pick up the outgoing mail as usual, and then continue south where the trap would be set. The law wanted everything to appear completely normal. Nathan arrived right on schedule, and Diana's heart clenched at the sight of him. He looked calm, even confident, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Morning," he said, kissing her cheek quickly. "I am going to get this over with and be back before you know it. Please be safe," Deanna whispered. "I love you." "I love you too," Nathan replied. "This time next week we will laugh about how worried we were." Deanna wanted to believe that, but as she watched Nathan ride south with his mail satchel, she felt a deep sense of foreboding. Thomas came out to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "He will be fine," Thomas said, with more confidence than Deanna felt. "Nathan is smart and capable. Trust him." The day dragged on endlessly. Deanna tried to focus on her normal tasks but found herself constantly drifting to the window, looking south as though she might see something in the distance. Evening came, then night, and still no word. Thomas assured her this was normal, that the trap might take time to spring, that news would not travel back to Montrose immediately. Diana did not sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, praying with an intensity she had never experienced before. She bargained with God, promising anything if Nathan would just be safe. Morning came, gray and cold. Deanna was already dressed and sitting on the porch when she saw a rider approaching from the south, moving fast. Her heart leaped into her throat as she recognized one of the deputy marshals who had been part of the operation. She ran to meet him, Thomas close behind. "Is Nathan all right?" she demanded before the man could even dismount. The deputy's face was grave. "He is alive, madam, but he took a bullet. The outlaws are in custody, but there was a firefight. Your fellow is hurt." Deanna felt the world tilt. How bad? Bad enough. "He was conscious when they took him to the doctor in our way. That was last night. I came as soon as I could to tell you." "I need to go to him," Deanna said immediately. She turned to Thomas. "I need to go now." Thomas did not hesitate. "I will arrange for a wagon and driver. We will leave within the hour." The journey to Auray took most of the day, over rough roads that made Deanna want to scream with impatience. Thomas came with her, and they barely spoke during the trip, both lost in worry. Deanna clutched Nathan's mother's ring on her finger, willing it to be a talisman of protection, even though she knew it was too late for that. Auray was a mining town nestled in a narrow valley, larger than Montrose and rougher around the edges. Thomas asked for directions to the doctor's office, and Deanna was out of the wagon before it had fully stopped, running up the steps of a modest building with a painted sign indicating medical services. A stern-looking woman who must be the doctor's wife intercepted her. "Are you Miss Dawson?" "Yes, I am here for Nathan Turner." The woman's expression softened slightly. "He has been asking for you. Dr. Pemberton is with him now, but you can go in." Deanna entered the back room with her heart pounding. Nathan lay on a narrow bed, his upper chest and shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale against the white pillow. But his eyes were open, and when he saw her, he tried to smile. "Deanna," he said, his voice weak. "You came." She crossed to the bed in 3 strides and sank into the chair beside it, taking his hand carefully. "Of course I came. You foolish, brave, wonderful man. How bad is it? Could be worse," Nathan said, though his grimace suggested otherwise. "Bullet went through my shoulder, missed anything vital." Doctor says I will heal, though I might have limited movement for a while. The doctor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, emerged from the corner where he had been washing his hands. The wound is clean, which is fortunate. If Miss Dawson can help change the bandages and watch for infection, Mr. Turner can recover at home rather than staying here. He will need several weeks of rest, no riding or heavy work. I will take care of him, Deanna said firmly. Whatever he needs. Over the next few days, arrangements were made for Nathan to be transported back to Montrose. The Postal Service, grateful that Nathan had helped capture the outlaw gang, offered to cover all his medical expenses and granted him paid leave to recover. Thomas arranged for Nathan to stay with them, since Deanna could not properly care for him at his unfinished house without it being inappropriate. The journey back to Montrose was slow and painful for Nathan, despite Diana's best efforts to cushion him from the worst of the road's jolts. By the time they arrived home, he was pale and sweating with pain, and Deanna had to fight back tears as she and Thomas carefully helped him inside. A bed was set up for Nathan in the small parlor off the main room of Thomas's house, and Deanna became his constant nurse. She changed his bandages twice daily, brought him food and water, read to him when he was restless, and sat with him through the long nights when pain made sleep difficult. It was during this time, in the forced intimacy of illness and care, that Deanna truly understood the depth of her love for Nathan. She saw him at his most vulnerable, when fever sometimes made him confused, and he would call out for his mother or his long-dead father. She saw his frustration as his strong body failed to obey his will, the way he hated being dependent on her care. But she also saw his determination to heal, his gratitude for her presence, the way his eyes tracked her movements whenever she was in the room. "I am sorry," Nathan said one evening, about 2 weeks into his recovery. He was sitting up for the first time, propped against pillows, looking more like himself though still gaunt from weight loss. "This is not how I wanted things to go." Deanna, who was stirring a pot of soup on the stove, looked over at him. "What do you mean?" "I wanted to be strong for you, to build you a house and provide for you and be the husband you deserve. Instead, I am an invalid who cannot even dress himself without help." Deanna abandoned the soup and came to sit on the edge of his bed. "Nathan Turner, you took a bullet helping to stop a gang of outlaws who had murdered an innocent man. You are one of the bravest people I know. Do you really think I care whether you can dress yourself right now?" "I care," Nathan said quietly. "I care that our wedding has to be postponed again because I cannot even build a proper home for you yet." "The house can wait," Deanna said firmly, "and the wedding can wait if it needs to. What matters is that you are alive and healing." She took his good hand in both of hers. "Nathan, when I saw that deputy riding in and thought you might be dead, I realized something. All our planning, all our careful preparation for the future, none of it means anything without you. I do not care about the house or the timing or any of it. I just care about you." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "Do you remember that first day when I came to the post office and you brought me water? Of course. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. But more than that, there was something in your eyes, a kind of strength mixed with sadness, that made me want to know you, made me want to be the one to replace that sadness with happiness." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think that was the moment I started falling in love with you, even though I did not realize it yet." Deanna felt tears prick her eyes. "And I thought you were just another dusty cowboy." Nathan laughed, then winced and pressed his good hand to his injured shoulder. "Do not make me laugh, it hurts." "Then stop saying things that make me emotional," Deanna retorted, but she was smiling as she leaned forward to kiss his forehead gently. As February turned to March, Nathan grew steadily stronger. He graduated from bed to sitting in a chair, then to walking short distances around the house. The doctor declared his healing excellent, though he cautioned that Nathan's shoulder would always be somewhat weaker than before. Nathan, determined to prove everyone wrong, began exercising carefully, pushing his limits a little more each day. The relationship between Diana and Nathan deepened during this time. The enforced proximity, the intimate nature of her care for him, the long hours they spent talking, all combined to create a bond that went beyond romance into true partnership. They discussed everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, their views on religion and politics, and how to build a good life together. "I want children," Nathan said one afternoon. They were sitting together on the front porch, enjoying the first hints of spring warmth. "At least 3 or 4, if we are blessed. I want them to grow up knowing they are loved, that they have a home they can always return to." "I want that too," Diana agreed, "though I confess the thought of childbirth terrifies me a bit." "That is natural," Nathan said, "but you are strong, Diana. Stronger than you know. Look how you took care of me these past weeks. You never faltered, never complained." "Because I love you," Diana said simply. "Love makes us capable of more than we think we can do." By late March, Nathan was well enough to return to light work. The house was waiting, still unfinished, and he was eager to complete it. With help from men in town, work progressed quickly. The interior walls were finished and painted, the floors sanded smooth, the kitchen fitted with a good stove and cabinets Nathan had commissioned from a carpenter in Durango. Diana helped as much as she could, cleaning and organizing, hanging curtains she had sewn, arranging the furniture Nathan had been gradually accumulating. It was exhausting work but deeply satisfying, watching their home come together. One evening in early April, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Nathan and Diana stood together in the doorway of their completed house. "It is done," Nathan said, his voice full of quiet pride. "We have a home." Diana leaned against him, careful of his still healing shoulder. "It is beautiful, perfect." Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Diana Dawson, I have loved you for nearly a year now. You have been patient with my long absences, you have nursed me back to health, you have helped me build this house that is meant to be our future. I cannot wait any longer. Will you marry me now, this month, as soon as we can arrange it?" "Yes," Diana said, laughing through sudden tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later, on a beautiful spring morning in late April 1884. The ceremony took place in the small church in Montrose, with Thomas giving Diana away and most of the town in attendance. Diana wore a dress she had sewn herself from cream-colored silk. Thomas had ordered specially from Denver, and she carried wildflowers like the ones Nathan had brought her that first evening. Nathan stood waiting for her at the altar in a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his gray eyes bright with emotion. When Diana walked down the aisle and saw the look on his face, she felt a sense of rightness so profound it took her breath away. This was where she was meant to be with this man in this place. The minister, Reverend Harris, conducted a simple but heartfelt ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Nathan's voice was steady and sure. "I, Nathan Turner, take you, Diana Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Diana repeated the same vows, meaning every word with her entire being. When Reverend Harris pronounced them husband and wife and told Nathan he could kiss his bride, the gentle reverence of that kiss made Diana's heart overflow. The reception was held at the town hall, with food contributed by various townspeople and music provided by a fiddler and a man with a mouth harp. Deanna danced with Nathan, with Thomas, with several of the miners and ranchers who had become friends. But her eyes always returned to her husband, this man who had literally delivered himself into her life. Late in the afternoon, as they were preparing to leave for their new home, Deanna pulled Nathan aside. "Do you remember the day we met when you came to deliver letters? How could I forget?" Nathan replied, his hand resting on her waist. "I have thought many times about that day," Deanna continued. "About how you rode into town as just a courier doing his job, but somehow you ended up delivering something much more important." Nathan looked at her questioningly, and Deanna smiled up at him with all the love in her heart. "You delivered yourself to me," she said softly. "The greatest gift I could ever receive." Nathan's eyes shimmered with emotion, and he pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "And you received me," he whispered back. "You saw me, really saw me, and you chose me. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice." They left the reception in a wagon Nathan had decorated with ribbons, heading toward their home by the river. As they drove away, Deanna looked back at Montrose, at the post office where this had all begun, and felt a profound gratitude for the path that had led her here. Their first night in their new home was everything Deanna had dreamed of and more. Nathan carried her over the threshold despite her protests about his shoulder, and they spent the evening exploring each room of their house together, talking about where they would put things, what they would add as time and money allowed, how they would fill these rooms with love and life. When they finally retired to their bedroom, with its simple bed and the quilt Deanna had spent months piecing together, Nathan took his time showing her just how much he loved her. He was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and Deanna found herself responding with a passion she had not known she possessed. Afterwards, lying wrapped in Nathan's arms with the moonlight streaming through their window, Deanna felt a peace so complete it seemed to radiate from her very bones. This was home. This was love. This was the life she was meant to live. The next months passed in a blur of happiness. Nathan returned to work for the Postal Service, though he took a different position that kept him closer to home, managing mail distribution in the Montrose area rather than riding the long southern route. The pay was slightly less, but the regular hours and proximity to Deanna made it more than worthwhile. Deanna fell into the rhythm of managing their household, cooking and cleaning, tending the small garden they planted, learning the particular challenges of making a home in the Colorado climate. She made friends with other wives in town, joined the Ladies' Aid Society at the church, and slowly built a community around herself and Nathan. They spent their evenings together, sometimes reading aloud to each other, sometimes just talking about their days, sometimes sitting in companionable silence on their porch and watching the stars come out over the mountains. On weekends, they would often ride out together, Nathan showing Deanna more of the surrounding country, sharing his knowledge of the land and its secrets. It was on one of these rides in July that Deanna first suspected she might be pregnant. She had been feeling vaguely unwell for a few days, nothing serious but a persistent nausea and fatigue. When the feeling persisted, she went to see the doctor who had recently set up practice in Montrose. Dr. Morrison, a young physician fresh from medical school in Philadelphia, confirmed her suspicion. "Congratulations, Mrs. Turner. You are going to have a baby, likely sometime in early February." Deanna felt a mixture of joy and terror. She and Nathan had talked about children, had hoped for them, but the reality was suddenly overwhelming. What if something went wrong? What if she was not a good mother? What if the baby was not healthy? When she told Nathan that evening, he reacted with pure, unrestrained joy. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and protested, then set her down carefully as though she had suddenly become fragile as glass. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "You are happy?" Deanna asked, needing the confirmation. "Happy?" Nathan pulled her close, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Deanna, I am more than happy. I am grateful and excited and maybe a little terrified, but mostly I cannot believe how blessed I am." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Deanna continued her usual activities, though Nathan became increasingly protective as her belly grew. By fall, she was showing clearly, and the women of the church threw her a small party where they gave her practical gifts like baby clothes and blankets, and advice both solicited and otherwise. Thomas was delighted at the prospect of becoming an uncle. He visited often, usually bringing some impractical gift like a leather-bound volume of children's stories or an expensive carved wooden rattle. "I intend to be the favorite uncle," he declared, though as Deanna pointed out, he would also be the only uncle. Winter came hard again that year, and Deanna found herself grateful for the solid walls of their house and the good stove Nathan had installed. As her due date approached, she felt the baby moving inside her constantly, little kicks and rolls that never failed to amaze her. Nathan would often put his hand on her belly, marveling at the life they had created together. "I hope it is a boy," Deanna said one evening. "A son who looks like you." "I will be happy with whatever God gives us," Nathan replied, "as long as you both come through healthy." The baby came on a cold February morning in 1885, arriving with the dawn. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Deanna thought she could not endure another minute. But Nathan stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand, encouraging her, loving her through the pain. When their son finally entered the world with a healthy cry, Deanna felt a surge of emotion so powerful it made everything she had just endured seem insignificant. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Deanna's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Deanna looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and dark hair, and the way his eyes seemed to be trying to focus on her face, and fell instantly and completely in love. Nathan, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, wrapped his arms around both of them. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you for this gift." They named him Nathaniel Thomas Turner, honoring both his father and his uncle. Baby Nathaniel proved to be a good-natured child, sleeping relatively well and nursing eagerly. Deanna discovered depths of love she had not known existed, and watching Nathan with their son made her fall in love with her husband all over again. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, never complaining about sleepless nights or the demands of a newborn. Thomas was indeed a devoted uncle, visiting almost daily and insisting on holding Nathaniel for long periods while telling the infant elaborate stories about postal regulations and the importance of proper mail sorting. "It is never too early to start his education," Thomas declared when Deanna teased him about it. The years that followed were full and rich. Nathaniel grew into a bright, active toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 2, Deanna discovered she was pregnant again, and this time she approached the experience with more confidence and less fear. Their daughter Emma was born in September of 1887, during the first cool days of autumn. She had Deanna's blue eyes and Nathan's determined chin, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she drew breath. Nathan, who had been wonderful with Nathaniel, was absolutely smitten with his daughter, and Deanna often found him just watching Emma sleep, a look of wonder on his face. The Turner household was busy and sometimes chaotic, but always full of love. Nathan had been promoted to Postmaster when Thomas decided to retire and move to Denver to be closer to an old friend he was courting. The irony of Nathan taking over the position that had belonged to Diana's brother was not lost on any of them. "It has come full circle," Diana said on the day Nathan officially took over the post office. "You came to deliver letters to my brother, and now you are doing his job." "And I got you in the bargain," Nathan replied, kissing her soundly despite the fact that they were standing in the middle of the post office with several customers waiting. By 1890, their family had expanded again with the addition of twin boys, Henry and James, born in March. The house that had seemed so spacious was now comfortably full, with children's laughter echoing through the rooms and toys scattered across the floors. Diana sometimes felt overwhelmed by the demands of 4 children under 6, but Nathan was an equal partner in parenting, never considering child care to be solely her responsibility. They added onto the house, building 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. The land around their home was cultivated into gardens and a small orchard. Nathan bought a few chickens and a cow, and they became as self-sufficient as possible. Diana canned vegetables each fall, made her own butter and cheese, and taught the children to help with age-appropriate tasks. The children grew up knowing they were loved unconditionally. Nathaniel was serious and thoughtful like his Uncle Thomas, always asking questions and wanting to understand how things worked. Emma was adventurous and bold, the first to climb trees or wade in the river, keeping her parents constantly alert. Henry and James were inseparable, developing a twin language that only they understood, but both were gentle souls who loved animals and growing things. On their 10th wedding anniversary, in April of 1894, Nathan and Diana took a rare day away from the children, leaving them in the capable hands of a neighbor. They rode out to the Cottonwood Grove where Nathan had first asked permission to court Diana, where they had spent so many precious hours falling in love. The grove had not changed much, though the trees were perhaps a bit taller. They dismounted and walked hand in hand through dappled shade, remembering. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Leaving your city life behind, tying yourself to a postal worker in a small Colorado town?" Diana looked at her husband, at the lines time and sun had etched deeper into his face, at the threads of silver beginning to show in his dark hair. She thought about their 4 children, their home, the life they had built together through joy and hardship and everyday mundane moments. "Never," she said firmly. "Not even once. Nathan, you gave me everything I did not know I needed. A home, a family, a purpose, a love deeper than I imagined possible. How could I regret any of that? I love you," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I have loved you since the day I delivered myself to you, and I will love you until the day I die." "And beyond," Diana added, tilting her face up for his kiss. "We will love each other beyond death, into whatever comes after." They made love there in the grove, on a blanket Nathan had wisely brought along, with the sound of the river and birdsong around them. It was sweet and familiar and still exciting even after 10 years of marriage, a reaffirmation of the commitment they had made to each other. As they lay together afterward, Diana's head on Nathan's shoulder and his fingers tracing patterns on her arm, she reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. If her parents had not died, if Thomas had not been a postmaster in Colorado, if Nathan had not taken that postal route, if she had not been standing on that porch sweeping when he first rode into town, their paths might never have crossed. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, feeling her stillness. "About destiny," Diana replied. "About whether we were meant to find each other or if it was just chance." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "Does it matter? We found each other either way, we chose each other. That is what counts." "You are right," Deanna agreed. "Though I like to think we were meant to be together, it makes a better story." Nathan laughed, the sound warm and full. "Then let us say we were meant to be, the postal worker and the postmaster's sister, brought together by letters and fate and love." The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard times, a drought one year that made water scarce, a winter when Nathaniel fell ill with scarlet fever and they thought they might lose him, economic troubles that affected the whole region. But there were far more good times, birthdays and holidays, school plays and church socials, lazy summer afternoons and cozy winter evenings, the thousand small moments that made up a well-lived life. The children grew and thrived. Nathaniel showed an aptitude for mathematics and eventually went to work in a bank in Grand Junction. Emma, true to her adventurous nature, became a teacher and moved to a small school near the Utah border where they desperately needed educators. Henry and James took over their father's postal work, eventually running the Montrose post office together when Nathan decided to retire. Nathan and Diana grew old together, their love deepening and mellowing with time. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their small house always full of visiting family. On warm days, they would still walk down to the cottonwood grove, moving slower now but with hands still clasped tightly together. On a spring morning in 1925, Nathan Turner died peacefully in his sleep, his wife of 41 years lying beside him. He was 68 years old, and he had lived a good life, full of purpose and love and meaning. Diana, bereft but grateful for the years they had shared, held his hand one last time and whispered, "Thank you for delivering yourself to me." She lived another 3 years without him, cared for by her children and grandchildren, still sharp of mind even as her body failed. On a morning in late April 1928, Deanna Dawson Turner passed away in the bedroom of the house Nathan had built for her all those years ago. She was 67 years old. They were buried together in the Montrose Cemetery, beneath a simple headstone that read, "Nathan and Deanna Turner, beloved parents and grandparents, united in life and death." Near their graves, someone had planted cottonwood saplings that would grow tall and strong over the years, sheltering their resting place just as the cottonwoods by the river had sheltered their love. Their children and grandchildren would gather at that grave site for years to come, bringing flowers and sharing stories about the love story that had started it all. They would tell about how Nathan had ridden into town to deliver letters and had ended up delivering himself to Deanna instead. They would talk about the house Nathan built, the children he and Deanna raised, the love that had sustained them through everything life threw their way. And though Nathan and Deanna were gone, their love story lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected deliveries, and that true love, once found, never truly dies. The Turner family continued to grow and flourish, spreading throughout Colorado and beyond. Some became postal workers like Nathan, some teachers like Emma, some bankers like Nathaniel. But all of them carried with them the legacy of Nathan and Diana's love, the understanding that family was the most important thing, that love required both passion and commitment, that a life well lived was one lived in service to those you loved. The house by the Cottonwood Grove stood for many more years, eventually becoming a historical site, preserved as an example of early Colorado homesteading. Visitors would walk through the rooms where Nathan and Diana had raised their family, would see the kitchen where Diana had cooked thousands of meals, the bedroom where their children had been born, the the porch where they had sat together on countless evenings watching the sun set behind the mountains. And sometimes, people swore they could feel something special in that house, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature, a sense of peace and love that lingered long after the people who had created it were gone. Some said it was just imagination, the power of knowing the story that had unfolded within those walls. Others believed it was something more, an echo of the deep and abiding love that Nathan and Diana had shared, imprinted somehow on the very boards and beams of the home they had made together. The Cottonwood Grove remained as well, protected by the Turner family and eventually donated to the town as a park. Young couples would walk there, would sit beneath the trees and dream about their futures, would sometimes carve their initials in the bark the way Nathan and Diana never had, too respectful of the living trees to mar them. The post office in Montrose changed and modernized over the years, eventually moving to a new building when the old one became inadequate for the town's needs. But a plaque was placed on the original building, now converted to a museum, commemorating Nathan Turner's years of service, and noting that this was where one of Montrose's great love stories had begun. On the anniversary of Nathan and Diana's wedding day each April, their descendants would gather for a reunion, dozens of people spanning multiple generations, all connected by that first meeting between a cowboy delivering letters and a postmaster's sister sweeping a porch. They would share meals and stories, would introduce new babies and congratulate new graduates, would maintain the connections that Nathan and Diana had valued so highly. And they would always end the day at the cemetery, standing together by Nathan and Diana's grave, renewing their commitment to family and love, and all the values their ancestors had held dear. Someone would inevitably retell the story, how Nathan had come to deliver mail but had delivered himself instead, how Diana had received him and his love, how they had built a life together against the harsh but beautiful backdrop of the Colorado frontier. The story became part of Montrose's history, included in books about the town's founding and development, taught to schoolchildren as an example of how their community had grown. Nathan and Diana Turner became local legends, their love story taking on almost mythic proportions, though the reality had been even better than the myth. Because the truth was that Nathan and Diana had been ordinary people who had found something extraordinary together. They had not been perfect, had argued and disagreed and frustrated each other at times as all couples do. But they had also loved each other with a fierce and unwavering devotion, had chosen each other every single day of their marriage, had built something lasting and beautiful out of the raw materials of their love and commitment. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though Nathan's injury and recovery had certainly been dramatic enough. It was instead a story of small moments, of daily choices, of showing up for each other again and again through good times and bad. It was a story of building a home, raising children, creating a life together one ordinary day at a time until those ordinary days added up to something truly extraordinary. And perhaps that was why their story endured, why it continued to be told generations after they were gone. Because people recognized themselves in Nathan and Diana, saw their own hopes and dreams and struggles reflected in that long-ago love story. They understood that true love was not about perfection, but about persistence, not about avoiding hardship, but about facing it together, not about grand romantic gestures, but about choosing each other every single day. The letters Nathan had delivered on his postal route were long since lost or destroyed, the words they contained forgotten by time. But the love he had delivered to Diana, and she to him, lived on. It lived on in their descendants, in the stories that were told about them, in the house and the grove and the town they had helped build. It lived on as a testament to what was possible when two people found each other and chose to build a life together, when they committed to loving each other through whatever came their way. And in the end, that was the greatest delivery Nathan Turner ever made. Not the mail he had carried through mountain passes and across rivers and through all kinds of weather, but himself, his heart, his love, his commitment, his life. He had delivered all of himself to Diana Dawson that day in June of 1883, and she had received him with open arms and an open heart. Together, they had created something that death could not diminish, a love that transcended their mortal years and became part of the fabric of their family and their community. As the sun set over the mountains on that April day when their descendants gathered to remember them, someone inevitably would quote Diana's words to Nathan, spoken so many years ago in the cottonwood grove. "You delivered yourself to me," she had said, "the greatest gift I could ever receive." And Nathan's response, equally important though less often quoted, "And you received me. You saw me, really saw me, and you chose me." That exchange, that mutual giving and receiving, that seeing and choosing, was the foundation of everything that came after. It was the beginning of a love story that never really ended, that continued to echo through the generations, inspiring and encouraging all who heard it. Nathan and Diana Turner had lived and loved and died, as all people do. But their love story remained, a bright thread woven into the history of Montrose, Colorado, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest moments, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that when we open our hearts to receive the gifts that life delivers to us, we open ourselves to possibilities beyond our wildest dreams. The Postal Service continued its work, long after Nathan's time, connecting people across vast distances, carrying words of love and loss and everything in between. But for the Turner family, mail would always carry an extra significance, a reminder of how their family had begun, with a cowboy delivering letters and finding love instead. And so the story ended where it began, with letters and love and a small town in Colorado where two people had found each other against all odds. Nathan Turner had come to Montrose to deliver mail and had ended up delivering himself to Diana Dawson. She had received him and his love, and together they had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love to transform lives, build families, and create meaning in an often harsh and unforgiving world. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love fulfilled. And in that fulfillment, they left behind something precious for all who came after them, a reminder of what was possible, an example of what love could be, and a challenge to live as fully and love as deeply as they had. The greatest delivery had been made, the greatest gift received, and the love that resulted would echo through eternity.